2021 Library Board for the City of Sweet Home meeting to order. And the first order of business is the approval of last month's minutes.
I'd make the motion to go ahead and approve those minutes.
All right, Don Hopkins has made a motion to approve the minutes. All right, Eva Journey has seconded that motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And anyone opposed? All right, minutes are passed. And then at this time, we will have the report of the interim librarian. So I'm going to turn it over to City Manager Ray Towery.
Thank you. Unfortunately, start off with a little bad news. As of tomorrow, Linn County goes back into the high risk category. We are not going to really change anything at the library, except we will institute contact tracing as of tomorrow. So everybody that comes into the library will be taking their name and their phone number in case there's any kind of reported outbreak. Other than that, same hours, same thing, nothing really changes. I did, I believe, include the sector risk level guidance chart for you in there. Librarians are saying that they've been told they fall under the retail stores, which means that we're back down to that 50% occupancy. I haven't seen that anywhere officially from the governor's office, but we'll go with it until someone tells us otherwise.
I did have a quick question on the contact tracing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something new?
Yeah, we didn't do it last time when we were in the high risk, but we're going to go ahead and do it at this point, just as a safety measure.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about that?
We'll go ahead and move on then. Library needs assessment. I've simply included that for your information. It's the last report we got from the architect and consultant firm. Just presenting that to you for your reading pleasure at some point in time within the next few weeks. Next steps would be some type of like a work session where we would have the architects here introduce their findings, probably a joint meeting. It'd probably be at a council meeting, and we would invite you as the board to attend that meeting as well. I think they kind of spell out in there some of the things, which I don't think any of it will be a surprise to anybody. But they'll also spell out some of the next steps as we move forward in getting some harder costs through some design, potential design that would be built around these needs. And then after we figure out some harder costs or more accurate cost estimate, then we could start looking at where we're going to find that funding. We are, of course, always looking for different funding options. The libraries are a very popular grant recipient. And we have had some discussions with a couple of prominent potential local donors as well. And we will continue with those discussions moving forward. Any questions on that? Okay. Recruitment update. We had listed that our library recruitment, we do our first review on Monday. We received a total of 12 applications, of which 9 of them are very highly qualified. They have masters in library science or library service. They're from Georgia, Minnesota, Washington. On paper, 9, maybe 10 of them are very, very impressive. It's an extremely good pool of applicants. I'm going to work with, what I don't want to do is bring 9 people in for an interview. So I'm going to reach out to Buzzy, the state library office, ask him about maybe helping us formulate a list of follow-up questions for these top 9, try and narrow it down to 5 or 6, and then bring in that top 4, 5, 6 for actual in-person interviews. But extremely pleased with the applicant pool. You've got people that have been librarians, full-fledged librarians at larger libraries, at research libraries. Very, very pleased with the applicant pool. So,
Are any from Oregon? Or are they all?
yeah,
from
no, there's a
outside
couple
the
from
state?
there's a couple from Oregon. Yeah, they're from all over.
Anybody have any questions about any of the recruitment and what's happening there?
What's the timeline in which you're going to start doing the interviews?
I'm gonna talk to Buzzy on that, and I'm not sure what his turnaround time will be in helping us with questions, or if he has a list of questions just already on his computer he can send to us. It's going to not only be library specific questions, but it's going to be questions related to culture, leadership, coaching, mentoring. It'll be a little bit of everything. So it's probably going to take us, we are out at our executive team training next week. So that's probably at least 2 weeks out before we would even distribute to those 9 or 10. So it's probably going to, and you give them at least a week. So it's probably at least a month before we have all of that turned back into review and narrowed down to that top 4 or 5. I didn't expect, we haven't had a recruitment where we've gotten recruitments with 3, 4, maybe 5, like absolutely, yeah, we've never had 9, 10 as qualified as this pool. So very, very happy about it.
And there are going to be, sounds like there's going to be cultural questions and
Absolutely,
the different, because I know we ran into that last time where people ended up very qualified, but Oregon was not a good fit for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Or Sweet Home.
Wait, that's
I mean,
true. Or
yeah,
Sweet Home.
Sweet Home's not a typical Oregon community by any means. So we'll, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. If there's no other questions on that, so there's a information only for staff. I know some people had some staff questions last meeting.
Correct.
So thank you for putting that in there. That's good to be able to see. And it's toward the back of your book. I don't know if anybody has any questions on the board about the staffing hours.
So what we've done
Almost
is, since I've
almost at the back, right
Yeah.
before statistics, you'll find it.
what we've done is we created the calendar in that first month, and then as we've gone along, when staff has said, hey, for instance, we didn't really put out reminders during a lot of COVID of overdue books, or go up, send people, hey, you got to either return the book or pay for it. So we had about 6, 7 months of catch up to do on that to try and track those down. So staff said, hey, we need to do this. Can't really do it when we're open. So if you look, we've added time for Diane and Joy. So they come in before we open on pretty much every day other than Friday, Saturday. So they can do some of those other things that they need to get done. So including some hours designated for them to work on the summer reading program and getting that up and off the ground.
So if they felt like this is adequate now for getting the stuff done?
Anytime they've said, "Hey, I need a couple hours to do this," we put it on the schedule. So, it's if not, they just need to ask, and we'll add some for somebody.
That's the only questions I had about it. Anybody else have staffing questions? The hours? All right. All right, now, okay. I'm assuming this is going to be Brandon. All right, we'll turn it over to you, Brandon, for the fiscal report.
Thank you. So starting. Oh. Turn that off. Okay, starting on page 104 in your packet is the financial report. This gives you a snapshot of where the library is through the end of March. I'll kind of walk through each page so you kind of get a feel for, I think this is maybe slightly different than what you'd been presented with in the past. This comes right out of our Springbrook software. So on page 104 is just the beginning fund balance. This just shows, so the budget column is what we had budgeted for the year to start off with. And what you'll see here is we actually started off with about $10,000 more than we had estimated. So certainly good news there. The second page of that report gets into the meat and potatoes, I guess, if you will. The top section there talks about the overall personnel. So you'll notice that, for example, that top line staff pay, it says a 70% has been expended. Through the end of March, if everything was kind of in line, you'd expect something closer to 75%. So this is where we're starting to realize some of the vacancy savings that will roll over in that fund. And down toward the bottom, the bolded line there for personal services, 70% again. So we're definitely seeing some of those savings in this current fiscal year. As you go down further through the report, you'll find each of the individual expenditure lines that we use. The budgets are estimates. What we care about overall is whether or not departments meet that bottom line, as we call it. And so in this case, the materials and services was budgeted at basically $210,000. We've spent $70,000 to date. So 33%, obviously low, definitely a result of the expenditure freeze initiated during the first part of the fiscal year. I know that the library has been very quickly purchasing many library books. Julie can attest to that as she has to temporarily enter each of those into our financial system. So they are quickly buying as much as they can to help replenish the stock and make sure that things are flowing. The next page outlines our revenues to date. So interest earnings we record at the end of the year, so we'll know more about that as we get closer. You can see in the other revenue section that we had budgeted $8,000 for the year in other revenues, and to date we've brought in $72,000. The biggest difference being miscellaneous grants, miscellaneous operating grants there at $66,546. Primarily, that is the Linn County Youth Activities grant that the library received. We don't, unless we know for sure that grants are coming in, we tend not to budget for them because otherwise that artificially inflates the budget. And if something happens or we don't realize the same receipts, then that money could accidentally be spent and dip into fund balance and reserves. So we tend not to budget for those specifically. Finally, I'll call it the best part, the property tax section. So we budgeted $453,000 for the year. We are currently through the end of March sitting at $460,000, and that will go up through the last 3 months of the year. So definitely good news on the property tax front. Next page highlights the transfers. Again, those will occur at the end of the year. The 13,000 is a transfer set aside for reserve, basically. And the library makes that transfer each year. So, if there's any questions about the year-to-date activity, again, it's through the end of March. And for your next meeting, we'll likely be able to give you April.
Well, I have a question about the transfer out
Mhm.
of the 13,000.
Yes.
Where is that transferred to?
It's transferred to a project and equipment reserve that holds multiple. You can be heard. That holds a lot. Holds all of the other reserves for other funds and departments across the city. The library's balance in that fund is about 76,000 through the end of this current fiscal year. So by the end of June, we anticipate that the library will have 76,000 in reserve.
Okay.
I have a question. So given that we will have a pool of candidates for the vacant librarian job, what are the expected expenses for that, and what line item would it come out of? And do we pay for travel expenses for people coming in from out of town, et cetera?
That's all negotiable.
Mhm.
I think Brad and I had a conversation today as we're preparing, or the other day as we were preparing the budget, of looking at this initial pool of candidates. I don't think any of them are going to come in at the bottom step. I think we would end up negotiating that they're all going to come in at the middle or higher, probably higher, quite honestly. As far as those expenses, they would all come out of the library fund because they are library expenses. How much that would be, that it would all be negotiable as we work through the process. We may pay for part of travel expenses. We may pay for all travel expenses. We'll have to take a look at that and see where we end up.
To add to that, as far as the recruitment expenses are concerned, yes, those are paid for by the department that has the vacancy. And yes, typically the city is responsible for recruitment-oriented expenses. So if somebody's traveling to Sweet Home to do an interview, we'd cover that travel.
So, I don't know, maybe this is question's a little premature, but the office of the librarian really needs work, and it's kind of an embarrassment to show it the way it is to a new candidate. Like, we really love you and you're wonderful and please come work here, but this is your office.
Yeah.
So again, is there any anticipation of costs related to refurbishing that particular room?
We did not budget for any kind of construction in
Yeah.
there. That being said, it could definitely use a good reorganization and cleaning.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll certainly do all of those things. What we'll do is when we recruit in this next year's budget, we'll have money in there for a desk and a chair and a computer, and the person will be able to choose their own furnishings.
So I'm also just concerned about the wiring. I mean, it's really gnarly in there.
Yeah, no, there's wires running all over the place
Yeah.
that shouldn't be there.
Right.
We'll tackle all of that.
Yeah, that would be good. I mean, we would like to put our best foot forward.
Absolutely.
And so
Yeah.
giving
Yeah,
that consideration would
the
be
library
good.
will look very well, as good as a 70-year-old building or 60-year-old building can look when that time comes.
Okay.
So I just want to piggyback off what Don was asking. So this money that's transferred for reserves, what triggers that to be transferred back in?
It can be used so it's a project and equipment reserve specifically. So if there's a planned need for something that wouldn't come out of the typical operating, or we need some extra for furniture or for a remodel of some sort in an office, then that could trigger bringing that money back over. That has to be budgeted, of course, and so that would go through the normal process. What we have been doing currently is trying to set aside as much as possible to prepare for an eventual build, remodel, whatever it may be, of a new library, so that the city has some cash available to contribute should we not be able to find grants enough to cover or additional help.
Okay, that's kind of what I was wondering. Is that the plan with the reserve right now, more to save it for a new
Yes.
facility?
And I think you'll see when we get to the budget discussion there that I have set aside a very hefty amount of library funds that will be used for that purpose,
Yeah,
for the
'cause
construction of a new
it's
library.
always helpful. The more you can have for that, the
Right.
better.
So you guys have had a couple of questions regarding spending over the past couple meetings. So just to reiterate, if you're not familiar with the budgeting process, essentially as a budget officer, I entrust Brandon to put together a budget. We meet with department heads, all department heads. In the library is the only advisory board we have actually where it's specific that you guys will recommend a budget. Park and Tree Committee reviews it and they make a recommendation, but I don't believe it's in the ordinance the way it is for yours. Your recommendation goes into the budget document. The budget document is presented to the budget committee, which is 7 city councilors and 7 community volunteers. So a board of 14. They review every department's budget, make recommendations, and by majority, whatever comes out the other end of that process then goes to the city council with public hearings, then adopted by the city council. And we as staff are bound to stay within that budget. If we do not, then when we're audited by our independent auditor, we receive notes and warnings and nasty letters that end up in the newspaper. Right, Benny? Yes. So we're constrained to whatever is passed by the city council, and we cannot overspend that. Nor can we just transfer money left and right out of from one fund to the other. And very specifically, the library funds can only pay for library expenses, and the police department funds can only pay for police department expenses.
All right, then we have, looks like here next, the circulation report. Now you gave us new copies. Is this something's corrected on
yeah,
here,
after we
right?
posted it, I looked at it. I was putting it in the council packet as well, and I realized that didn't add up right in the spreadsheet. So, and as I started looking some more, and as I'm learning more about what these numbers actually mean, there were a couple things I wanted to highlight as well. So then I went to the other one, and I tried to color code them for you. But on the by type is what we refer to as, which is the larger spreadsheet. The error was the total at the bottom of 2021 did not include January. So it was about 2,693 short. So I fixed that, and you can see that makes a big difference. So going by calendar year, so we were just talking budget year, fiscal year, which in Oregon is July 1 through June 30. This report goes by calendar year. So we are right now sitting at, as of the end of March, the materials that were checked out were at 20% of the 5-year average and 29% of 2020. So being that this represents the end of the first quarter, you would expect it to be roughly 25%. So so we're still a little bit under our 5-year average, but over where we were or would expect to be compared to last year. And one thing you need to keep in mind, again, there's with statistics is that 5-year average includes 2020, which drags those other 4 years down because we were at literally 34% under where we'd been the previous 5 years. But all in all, it's a good indication that people are getting back out and getting into the library, and we're excited to see that. That's good news for everybody. When you go to the next one, which is the smaller one with all the colors, each color corresponds to the boxes down below, and it kind of tells you where they're at. The big one is the gold with the red outline, because that kind of outlines the work that's being done, the number of checkouts. That number looks pretty darn good, actually. Again, a little bit above last year by about where we would expect to be by about 4%. But again, about 6% below the 5-year average. So, and I'm again learning this. So one of the questions I had, and I reached out to the gentleman who oversees all of these stats and reports in the Evergreen system with the City of Albany. In my mind, the total for 2021 on the big spreadsheet that, or for instance, in March, let's say, it might be the easiest way to look at it. That 3364 to me should represent all of our materials that were checked out, just broken down by type. In the colored one, if you look under checkouts for March of 21, that total is only 3230. So there's a discrepancy in that number of about roughly 130. So I reached out and his name is Jeremy, explained essentially the higher one measures all of our materials, and those materials that leave our shelves and are checked out, essentially what it means is about 130 pieces from our collection were checked out at a different library as part of the consortium, but they were checked out. We just didn't check them out. So that accounts for the discrepancies when you look at those total numbers being different across those lines. And he double checked it and ran a different report, which was more apples to apples, and came back and told me that if he sets it that way, they do come out to be the same number. So.
All right. Thank you. These easy to read, easy to understand. Does anybody have any questions? Looks like upward trend.
Yes.
So far this year, and that's good. All right. So the new business, of course, is the looming budget review.
Yay.
So I'm assuming that's in the back here.
Page
Yes.
110. I think it's the last 2 pages of your packet.
I'm just going to let Brandon go with this. Essentially, the good news is with all of the forecasting symbols, and when budgeting, I always say, is part science and part art, and sometimes it's the dark arts where we rub the crystal ball a little bit and see what comes out of it. But all of our indicators seem to indicate a good year is coming next year. All of our economic indicators are indicating some growth. And we're excited, particularly related to the library. Property values still continue to climb, so that tax base continues to increase. And honestly, for us, it probably couldn't come at a better time, as we're looking to either do a massive remodel of the likes which you probably haven't seen before, or are completely looking to do a completely new building. So we're we will be asking that we collect all of the levy money, and utilizing the excess into that fund so that we can save it over the next years and work towards, again, some type of capital project with the library. With that, I'll turn it over to Brandon. He can talk about the specifics.
Okay. I hope that you like this budget as much as I did, because it does contain a lot of good news, I think, for kind of the longevity of the library. And there are specific items in here that I'm hoping to touch bases with for your sake. And then I'm happy to answer any questions you have about it. If you have considerations or things that we want to make changes to potentially, the code allows for the library board. The library board has to sign off on this. So if there are concerns, let's talk about them. Happy to go through them and we can figure out what's going to work best. So the first piece of good news is that beginning fund balance, 511,000 is what almost 512,000 is what I've projected for the 2022 fiscal year. That is significantly higher than any of the past fiscal years. I've included 2017, 18, 19, and 20 here for you. And then the 2021 year to date is almost through March. This came out of our new budgeting software. So the numbers may slightly vary from the report you looked at earlier, which contained all of March. This is only partway through March. A very high beginning fund balance, again, vacancy savings and spending freeze is what is contributing to that. So we will leave those funds in the library fund and we'll see where they're going to go later. Current property taxes is that second line there. What I am projecting for next year is that compression rates will go from 18% in the current year down to 15%. As Ray mentioned, property values in Sweet Home have climbed through January, which is the cutoff for the consideration for property taxes this coming year. So I have reduced the compression again. 15% is extraordinarily low for this area. When I started here, that number was in the mid-30 range. So we're really excited to see that number coming down. Delinquent property taxes, we tend to budget a % increase over the prior year, just as taxes get higher over time. Library fees, I left the $5,000 budget. It seems like it holds water given the actuals of the past. Interest earnings. Interest earnings right now for all of the city accounts and likely for everyone across the board are pretty sad these days. So we are taking a hit in those interest earnings. I did drop them, as you can see. We'd planned for almost $9,500 in this year, and I know we're not going to hit that. So I budgeted $5,300 for next year, and then $3,000 in miscellaneous revenue, which realistically covers the donations in the miscellaneous revenue line. So total revenue budget of $522,043. Down to the personnel expenditures, there are no changes budgeted to the library staff makeup. So this includes 1 full-time director, 2 3/4-time library assistants, and a half-time library assistant. So that's the hours that were before, I guess, pre-COVID stuff. So $163,000 in budget there. You can see a small increase in the group insurance. A lot of that is due to, I guess, some unknown in what the new director will choose as far as insurance costs. So we are budgeting a little bit conservatively there to make sure that there's enough to make it for the year. FICA and Medicare is set for us. That's 7.65% of the total staff pay. Retirement costs, 22.4 is relatively in line with the past budget, and you can kind of see it growing over the number of fiscal years since that's based on salaries. And then unemployment contributions and workers' compensation set by agencies outside of us. So 0.1% for the unemployment contribution, and the workers' compensation is set by SAFE. Total personnel budget $257,000. That is higher than the $239,000 that we budgeted for this existing year. Down to the materials and services section. If you look at the bottom line, it says 201,000 in bold there on the second page versus the almost $210,000 for this fiscal year. I didn't reduce this budget as a way to constrain the library by any means. But if you look at the history, 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020, the highest amount that was spent in the materials and services grouping was 139,000. So 201,000 is fairly high, but yes, less than the current year budget. What we're trying to do is what I call right-sizing these budgets based on the line items and the spending of the past. So I tried to go through and make some assumptions on what kind of increases would we see. So for example, in some of the utilities, I think I added some small increases based on kind of market and where things were going. If you look at, for example, office supplies, they had 4,000 budgeted for this year, but you can see spending in the past years is regularly higher than that. So we moved that up to 7,500. Ultimately, I go through and I set all these line items, but once the budget is adopted, I don't care about the line items. And that sounds crazy, but what I care about is the bottom line, because that's the legal requirement for us. So if the library has adjusting needs and needs to shift some of this around, they have that complete flexibility each fiscal year to do so. Capital outlay, you can see that we have not budgeted any capital. Somebody, I think it was Eva, asked about furniture. You can see that up in the materials and services line, the $2,500 there that somebody will be able to use, a new director, hopefully to kind of retrofit their office a little bit. But as far as any other capital expenditures, we don't have any planned for this next fiscal year as we wait to see kind of where the development of a building goes. Contingency down at the bottom. My practice has been to budget 3% of any personnel expenditures in that contingency line, and then 2% of all expenditures, including personnel, to sit in a contingency line. The contingency line is then used for any mid-year increases that were not planned. For example, this year, if we needed to, the contingency line would have covered the retirement of Rose. It's there for us to use if we need it. It's a lot easier to shift that around as far as budget law is concerned. But certainly we don't want to artificially inflate that either and make our expenditures look higher than they are. So again, 3% for any personnel costs and 2% for all costs is budgeted in contingency. The last line is the biggest, almost the biggest line, I think, the biggest individual line as far as an expenditure is concerned, the transfer out for capital. So in the past, that has been a nice flat $13,000. Based on a 5-year picture and what I think the library is going to have over the next 5 years, I have set an initial budget of $315,000 to be transferred out of the library fund and over to the project and equipment reserve. Again, that will be used for a new building or a renovation, whichever it becomes. But that is a significant chunk of change. And we're excited about the possibilities of being able to put that away. Now, I say all of this and would love your feedback on these figures, but also please know that as this goes to the budget committee, my proposal is subject to change on their end. So they have the ability to change my proposal if they decide that lowering the tax rate, which I don't think they will do, but if they decide that lowering the tax rate is a better use of resources for citizens, then that $315,000 would likely decrease because we try not to take away from the actual expenditures of the library. But instead of proposing to reduce the rate, we decided to leave it and set that aside for a new building. So that's what I have for you. Happy to entertain questions and thoughts and concerns from your standpoint.
Brandon, I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
One deals with the interest at $9,356. Now, is that local government investment pool interest?
Primarily, yes. We have this fiscal year started investing outside of that, trying to do market investments on bonds and some very safe equities. But yes, primarily that is local government investment pool.
Yeah, it just seems like a low amount for what I'm dealing with the fire and ambulance district, obviously, but
Sure.
I know what we get on it, and you should be getting the same amount.
The highest that I've seen that interest earnings rate through the LGIP is 2.75%. Right now we're down to 0.70. Pennies on the dollar, really. Certainly the fire and ambulance district, as far as an overall balance, likely has a large cash balance. If you're looking at it from just a library standpoint, we divvy it out based on cash balance when the interest earnings are recorded. And so the library's cash balance being, $400,000 versus, say, the water fund that carries up to $5 million in a year, the differential means that the water department gets its share and the library gets its share as well. So 0.70 doesn't net us very much overall. The interest earnings for March, I just looked at, were $6,000 on our $13 million cash balance. So it was again next to nothing, and that gets split amongst all of the funds in the city.
Because the actual amount is not even 9, Don. It's 5,000. He's lowered it to
Right.
5,363. So it's not even as high as you thought. Even actually a little lower.
So the 9,356, what we're assuming we will get this year, I said we're assuming 70% of that. So I don't even think we're going to collect that in this current fiscal year. And then I did add 1% of the overall dollars to the number that I planned for this current fiscal year. That's where I got the 5363. So yes, certainly the market.
But you're not expecting that, even that 9,000, really.
Not this year, no.
Realistically, to come. Yeah.
Right. Unfortunately, I wish we could. We were in the past, before COVID, we were seeing monthly interest earnings in the $25,000-$26,000 range on our LGIP cash. And like I said, we're down 20,000 a month in that almost. It hurts pretty bad. So we are trying to go outside of that local government investment pool to try to bring in additional or do better than that. But interest rates are hard right now.
There we go.
Got it.
So I understand at the bottom of materials and services, I know the administrative charge, what that deals with. What's the finance charge, though, on that?
So we tried to break this out so that it was clearer for everybody involved. So finance charges for service covers my office, the payroll functions that we do for the library, the billing that we do as far as accounts payable stuff. It does not cover time that my office spends on things like utility billing. We section that out and send that over to Public Works. But really, it's the expenditures related to doing the finance business for the library.
And
That's an edit.
so the difference with the administrative charge is what then?
IT. Ray just asked me if I was going to bring that up. So the city council has decided to move forward with hiring a full-time IT person for the city itself. We've gotten to a point where so much of our world is based in IT these days that our third-party IT consultant hasn't been able to keep up the way that the city would like to. We have Wi-Fi issues in this building on a regular basis. The library could really use some more hands-on help on a faster basis. We still have scanners that I know that are down. And when we're dealing with a third-party company, they have a bunch of other clients too. And so it's kind of, we're shelved for higher priority tickets. And so we've decided to move forward with hiring a full-time person. In the past, the IT expenditures for that third party have been billed out of the technical services line. We've just billed each of the departments directly for their share of the third party expenditures. Because we're bringing on a person, we've moved that into the internal service fund, and each of the departments will pay based on the number of people in their department. So the library is paying a smaller share, certainly, than the police department or city hall, things like that. So that's why you're seeing the increase in the administrative charges for service.
So if you go up to the previous page, page 110, that last section, you'll see the technical services line, the 28227 or the 24394. In this budget, that number is cut to 15, so it's nearly cut in half. So we've shifted that into a different area is what's happened to cover that expense.
Mm-hmm.
Since it's not a contract, it's now an actual person.
We hope that this will bring better stability from an IT standpoint for the city. This person will be able to assist the library with, if there's upgrades, for example, to Evergreen, they'll be able to work directly with Albany and their IT department on Evergreen changes and making sure that traffic flows freely from an information highway standpoint. LinkedIn recently did a big upgrade that required some IT support. This person will be here on site, ready to help plan projects. They'll be integral in the conversation for a new building and the IT related to that building. So we're really excited about the possibilities and the opportunities, and I think the library will be one major beneficiary as well.
Okay.
It's on. That one I think just malfunctions. It's okay. It's on.
There you go.
Here. So 35,391 that you're projecting.
Yes.
That's for just that IT person?
It's for city manager's office and the support that it provides. It's for the city attorney. It's for the communications individual in the city, and it's for the IT.
Okay, so we have that, plus we have the 15,000.
The 15,000 will cover Evergreen, LinkedIn, some of the software type charges that the library incurs.
Okay, that doesn't go towards the IT person.
Correct. It does not.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. That mic stays lit green, so
Start again.
that one's just finicky.
So those two areas are basically, each department is paying the city oversight, basically.
Correct.
Yeah. Anybody have any other questions?
Paying $71,000 to pay for things in City Hall, correct?
Yes. I was trying to think if everything was in City Hall. Yes.
Okay.
So 35 plus 21,
Oh, sorry. 56,000.
56,000 and change. Closer to 57.
No.
No.
Sorry. My apologies.
Okay.
I don't have any more questions. I don't know if anybody else does. So at this point, do we sit on this for a month? I can't remember. Or do we need to like be able to send it? I can't remember in the past if we've had it for a month and then brought it back, or if we just
I'm,
need
I'm
to
not
approve.
sure what you've done in the past. What I'll say is we don't have a month. We have
Okay.
2 weeks tops.
We
A
will
week?
distribute on the proposed budget on April 20th. So we have until then.
Okay. So basically, we need to give our approval or disapproval of this budget, the projected budget. Yes,
We
for
could,
you to be able to send it forward.
well, certainly,
We could book another meeting.
yeah, we could sit on it. We could have a meeting next week. We could do whatever. We just need to give Brandon a good 5-6 days to if we're going to make changes anyways, any substantive changes, we would need to give Brandon 5-6 days to make those adjustments in the budget overall.
And I'd certainly recommend that
I-
if you wanted to take a few days, and then that way, if you think of any questions that you have that you would like to discuss, we have some time. It's up to you.
Yeah, I personally don't. I don't know how the rest of the board feels. So looks like someone just needs to make the motion to approve the projected budget. Don, did you have any?
No.
Okay. All right. So someone needs to make the motion to.
I'd so move to go ahead.
Okay. So and Charlene seconds it. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. All opposed? Nobody? Nebulous nobody. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. Next meeting is May 13th, 2021. Same Bat Cave, same Bat Station. Showing my age.
Yep. Thank you.